OPTMZ. Dr. Peter Tierney is a highly experienced sports scientist, performance coach, and researcher with over a decade of experience in elite sports, including roles with Leinster Rugby, Chelsea FC, and Lululemon. He specializes in athlete recovery, data-driven performance strategies, and wearable technology to optimize health and performance.
Thanks Daniel for inviting me. I love getting random messages online, and this is definitely one of them. So hopefully this is of interest and relevance to some of you. And I have had some experience in apparel as well, which I have 1 or 2 slides on. I haven't put tons in terms of like presentation, but I am very happy to speak about that. And I guess the relevance of a researcher or a sports scientist in clothing and apparel as well. But today I really want to discuss in an exploratory sense the intersection of technology and performance and apparel, but specifically within culture as well and lifestyle. A little bit about me that the AI did a pretty good job of explaining as well. I did my bachelor's, master's and PhD in sports science based in Dublin, as you can tell from the accent. I've worked as a performance coach and a sports scientist in rugby, in the English Football Association in Chelsea, and then I spent 3 years working in Lululemon in their innovation team based in Vancouver as a senior researcher. So I'll explain some of that later on. And now what I tell people is I wear a lot of hats. So I consult with a few different companies, I research, I create some content, I educate, I'm a sports scientist. So I've got some projects ongoing with a big apparel brand. I'm working with 2 different fitness brands, some other tech companies as well, and still support some high performance and elite athletes as well. So it keeps my life pretty interesting to me anyway. Also today definitely will not be 30 minutes, so I'll probably be like 15, 20 minutes, and then I'm more than happy to hopefully take some questions and have a good conversation afterwards. But like I said, I want to really discuss the intersection between performance and culture and lifestyle. Is this doing right? It is okay. So the first product I want to show you is a running shoe from Adidas, and it's called the Evo SL. It's one of the most popular running shoes on the market. It has been optimized to increase energy return. It's breathable. It's made as light as possible to help with running performance. And there's probably been, I haven't worked in Adidas, but there's probably been years of research and testing and iteration to get this product to this point. On the right-hand side, then you'll see the exact same shoe in collaboration with Pharrell Williams. And the shoe is the exact same, apart from the colors and the branding and the marketing associated with it. And a shoe that's made primarily for running performance is now being worn as a fashion piece and a statement piece. So I guess the main point I'm trying to show here, and I have a few other examples, is the influence of like two completely different industries merging together. Nike is another example, and you can argue it started as a sportswear shoe and then is now a lifestyle shoe. But they've gone to one extreme and actually integrated electronics and technology into a product. So the product on the right is a collaboration with a company called Hyperice. Now, Hyperice make elite sport performance recovery products related to compression, heat, cooling, some pretty high-tech stuff. And Nike have now integrated both pneumatic compression, which is like a pump of compression, and heat into footwear. And this is a product that athletes of any level would wear prior to a warm-up. So think about a basketball player before they go out onto the court, they would wear this to help warm up their feet and ankles. Does anybody here wear a Whoop? You do, okay, one person, great. Does anybody else wear a different wearable device, like Apple Watch, Garmin's, other rings, that type of stuff? Okay, so they're usually, I'm actually surprised, because usually there's like, I've spoken to some place and it's like 70, 80%, but these devices are becoming more and more common. So maybe if I ask you this in 1 year's time, you may raise some more hands than today. But these devices track continuously 24/7, and they measure physiological metrics and physical outputs. So this device will measure things like steps, heart rate, breathing rate, and sleep as well at rest. The product has been completely developed for the elite athletes. So professional athletes performing to the highest level And then it's bled into society in terms of active people. But now you're actually seeing the integration of this technology as a status symbol and a marker of someone trying to portray that they're looking after themselves and being healthy. And so Whoop as a company, and this is an example of one, but other brands as well, have primarily made technology based around health and fitness and performance, but are now supplementing that with leather bands, gold, like 24 karat gold pieces. And you're seeing business executives, CEOs going into boardrooms wearing this technology, even though the primary use case for it is on a basketball court or a football field. And I think that's another interesting example of the sort of lines blurred between performance and lifestyle and culture as well. Oura Ring is another example of a piece of technology that's very popular as a sleep tracker, and they make, of course, nice colors and materials, and the idea is that you're supposed to wear this alongside other pieces of jewelry. So they have gold, silver, etc. But they actually collaborated with Gucci for a ring that cost, I think, over $1,000, which is pretty, well, I mean, as expected probably with Gucci, but expensive for this type of technology. And I believe they sold out pretty quickly. So surprisingly, for a piece of technology that I think they quadrupled the sale price, because of the branding and association with Gucci, they've entered a different market. And you saw some high-level female celebrities wearing this technology, which I think Oura is now valued at $11 billion in the States, which is, you know, crazy for a Finnish company that started in sleep tracking to get that sort of traction. And I think one of the main points as well for me, or my reflections, is instead of hiding technology like we maybe previously did, we're actually integrating it into sport, fitness, health, society. And this is just an example of a product from Adidas. Again, I've Adidas in this all the time, but I haven't actually ever worked with them. But instead of hiding a smartwatch like a standard sleeve, companies are now innovating solutions so people can check their smartwatch data when they're out for a run, or when they're meeting friends, or even check the time. So whatever that might be. And I think this is an example of how other companies are supporting the use of technology and even integrating it into product solutions as well. There's another example here. This was, I think, last year at the PGA Tour, a golf tour, and this is an athlete, Rory McIlroy from Northern Ireland. He is a sponsored Whoop athlete, but Whoop also sponsored or had a collaboration with the golf tour, and they were now not just showing golf footage, but they were highlighting live heart rate data from athletes. And I think you'll see more and more of this in the future, in terms of it's not just the standard variables or metrics that you'll see. It's going to be this introduction of live data and an insight that I think now people want more than just watching somebody perform a sport. They want to know what that person is experiencing and feeling. I'd be interested to see what someone's heart rate is on, like, during a walk, or like some, you know, just something that's obviously a different type of stress as well. And then another example, this is one of the best marathon runners of all time. Previously, elite athletes, and probably companies as well, would hide data as they think it's a competitive advantage to them. But over the last few years, you've seen athletes at the highest level sharing insight like heart rate numbers, pacing, training insights that people are really interested in now, and they've almost commercialized that aspect of it instead of hiding it. So again, you'll see a lot more transparency in these pieces. And you know, there's even collaborations between athletes and these companies to create their own watch bands and apparel associated with these companies. So again, another example of this sort of like concept of the blurred lines. And I love this because all the roles that I've held and even the things that I'm doing now, I find it very hard to put myself into one specific category. Particularly when I went to Lululemon and worked in apparel, it was a bit of a strange, I guess, like career move, because a lot of people expect someone who works in sport to go through and stay in sport. But when I went there and experienced some of the tools that we're using to help test and design some of the products that we're working on, I think we all work together well. It's always great to have a different viewpoint of a designer, developer, researcher, and other people to bring a product to life, particularly in the performance apparel space. So I've got a few examples of other products that I think have been integrated into society that have been made for very specific health or technical reasons, but are now much more commonplace. So does anyone know what this is? Or does anyone have one of these? So you have all the gadgets, don't you?
Sunrise
Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah. So my wife swears by this as well. There's a brand called Lumilamp, and the idea is that this clock, as well as the softer noise, or instead of an alarming noise from your phone, gradually wakes you up and mimics the sunlight, probably a little bit like these lights in front of me now. I feel like it's morning time. But this is a piece of technology that, again, I've used in professional sport to support circadian rhythm and biology, but it's now part of, everyday life in the office worker and the student and everything else. And it still isn't necessarily the nicest looking version. There are nicer ones like this, but you'll start to see, again, this type of technology embedded. And I think the design and the marketing is going to become so much more important on these, because I know, I would prefer one that looks a lot nicer than this one in front of me. Another product then, I'm sure everyone here knows Arc'teryx as a brand. I saw a lot of it when I lived in Vancouver and British Columbia. But this jacket and Arc'teryx as a brand, in my opinion, started and is founded on some of these, descriptors. So as a premium, but very utilitarian or technical brand. And their products are primarily built for function, to be outdoors. A lot of their jackets and outerwear are waterproof. And when I was in Vancouver, everybody had Arc'teryx gear because they were skiing, hiking, sailing. They were outside all the time. But I think now I've seen this in cities and even in London, where it's now a piece of fashion. It's now integrated so much in the city as part of commuting, and even some of their designs of certain products have lent into being sleeker, or for somebody who maybe doesn't even need that level of waterproofness and technology integrated into fabrics for living in London in the city. So I found that really interesting, and there's definitely other examples of that we can chat about afterwards. But that was one where, on one extreme, it's built for mountains and outdoors, yet it's worn in cities and universities and offices as well. Another example of this, which a lot of people find funny, is another running shoe. So the Nike Alphafly was made for some of the fastest marathon runners in the world. Some male runners trying to run near 2 hours, and female runners running below 2 hours, 10 minutes. So incredibly fast. Yet we've seen this with Nike, where they build for the elite top 0.1%, and everybody adopts the products that they make. So shoes are a great example. These have a carbon plate in them. They're literally maximized and developed for performance, yet I'm a casual runner, as are many other people, and they're wearing shoes with carbon plates to support their performance, even though they're technically developed for the elite. And in some cases, you see people walking in these, which I wouldn't advise because they're not very stable. But you do see, again, this sort of spread across something that's been built for the far right in terms of professional athletes, being adopted and worn across the whole spectrum of everyday wear and commuting as well. And I think one of the other interesting pieces that I reflected on when I was preparing this was a lot of metrics that I would consider as part of elite performance. So sleep, heart rate variability, temperature, breathing rate, recovery, all of these metrics used to be things that were only discussed really in sports performance. And now I'm on the tube, I'm in a coffee shop, I'm in a shopping, I'm everywhere, and I hear people talking about how much sleep they got, or how recovered they are, or they talk about different metrics from different wearables. And I think, a few years ago, if you showed people some of these Strava stats on the right-hand side, people maybe look at them and don't really understand what they are, but now they're so commonplace, and sharing some of those physical and performance metrics and attributes is actually part of the whole experience of actually, exercising or health in terms of, status and culture as well. And you'll see this in run clubs and even different brands now activating different aesthetics in run, and almost developing a team uniform for run clubs that people really latch onto and associate with as well. I'm going to show you, like I said, 2 slides on some of the products that I worked on at Lululemon, so I'm going to pivot, but it's the same theme in that we developed a lot of these products for elite performers. So one of the main projects that I worked on when I was in Lululemon was a project called Further. And if you haven't heard of it, I would definitely recommend just like having a search later on or a watch of some videos and content. We spent about 2 years developing products for a 6-day ultramarathon event that we put on in the desert. So we hosted it. And we developed bespoke product for all 10 female ultra runners. And so we managed to develop some products in a very, very short timeline, which if everyone's familiar in here, like sometimes getting a product to market can take a few years, and we got some of these products developed from zero to event in 16, 18 months, which is quick. And they were mainly developed for the specific needs of the ultra runner. So again, you maybe can't see this well in the image, but storage is a big component of what an ultra runner needs. So ultra runners can be out for hours and hours and sometimes days, and they need to carry fluid, fuel, their phone, keys, everything that you can think of because they're out for a long period of time. And so we developed that and integrated into a waistband in the shorts. And so that was one of the new sort of features that we really developed for elite athletes. But now we're seeing these 3 products, amongst a few other ones, are actually commercialized. So we developed them for a specific use case, but they're now available to mass market. And I think that point keeps coming up for me, even in my experience in, I guess, like even buying products, but now working with people and working in industry, is that a lot of these products, if you build for the extreme use cases, they often serve many people in between that as well. An example, this product is extremely niche. It's an ice tank. And so one of the challenges with ultra running is that you spend a lot of time in the sun, you get really warm. And one of the ways to cool you down is literally pouring cold water or ice on your body. And one of the challenges is that when you're trying to run as far as you can, or you're in a race, you don't want to stop to do that. So we developed a system where you could store ice in 3 different locations around the body. This ended up being, of the 10 female athletes we developed, this was one of their favorite products from an aesthetic point of view, even though that wasn't actually the main reason for developing it. So it was quite interesting to see this was a really functional product that a few of us pushed because it was an extreme need. And when we flashed up all of the products we developed, this ended up being aesthetically one of their favorites, maybe because of the fit as well and the work that some of the design team did a really good job on. Another product that has gone to market. So myself and Danny were chatting before. There's a lot of stuff that I can't speak about, but the things that have come to market, I can. And this is another example. Lululemon have called this a Show Zero polo shirt. This is a shirt that hides sweat. This is an example of a product and a technology that's integrated into clothing, but serves both a sporting activity and people in an office wear and business casual setting. So this product is marketed to some sports like golf or even tennis, where you maybe, if you play golf, you would go to the club afterwards to, socialize with other people. And that's a situation where you don't necessarily want to show sweat. And that's an example of where this technology can support. But also, for example, someone presenting or in an important board meeting, they don't want to show sweat as in a sort of a cultural sense in that setting. So this is a product that can hide it. And the example I've given here is black, but we tested this with different colors, and the technology is like really cool to see how much fluid this can hide from the inside of a shirt and not show any signs of sweat. So I think another example of the technology sort of being integrated into some of these everyday products that maybe people have never seen this before or even considered it as well. I've 3 more slides and I'm done talking. Another challenge that maybe is less linked to apparel per se or specifically, but we're seeing so much technology now that gets brought to market. And like you said, I think there's brands that are now integrating this into other products. But one of the challenges, and I think one of the big opportunities for a lot of companies now, is integrating information from different sources. So not in this room, because only one person has said they have a device, but there's been other rooms that I've spoken in where they have 2 or 3 devices that they wear. So someone might have an Apple Watch, a ring, and also something else. Then there's also apps where people track food, MyFitnessPal. There's blood tests you can gather information from. There's a continuous glucose monitor to measure your response to certain foods. And the problem people have now is that they have 7 different apps for 7 different devices and 7 different things. So I think the future of that is really integrating that and how it fits in with I guess, making it easy for people to take action with some of the information. I also think this is I've noticed this because I'm hyper aware of it, but performance is blended so much into, I say lifestyle, but actually luxury as well. And there's a big market for premium health offerings. And so there's 2 examples I put here in London specifically. Well, Equinox is global and Third Space, but these are like premium luxury facilities that are so nice, and they're so far evolved from what I would consider a traditional gym or, you know, conditioning space. And we've gone so far past just having some weights and some treadmills in one side of a room or in a porta cabin. And they're now like, everything is like the best quality. There's saunas, massage rooms, steamers, pools, everything. And the offerings just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger because I think people do demand and they enjoy spending time in these places. And I like the Third Space name because it is literally, for people who live in a city like this, it's the third space for them. It's not home, it's not work, it's somewhere else where you can go. And a lot of these spaces now are social spaces. So yes, people may go there to exercise and to relax, but often you'll see people like working from there and connecting with people and having a coffee there. And that's just another avenue for people to explore. I've shown like 2 products on the right-hand side. So Athletic Greens and IM8, they're 2 sort of superfood blends that have been heavily marketed. And I'm sure, well, hopefully now, if I brought you some awareness, you'll see ads for these all over London. And these are like a premium, expensive offering. I think the Athletic Greens might be like over £140 a month maybe for a multivitamin with some other ingredients in it. So I'm not here to tell you what's good or bad, but it's interesting that, you know, people are so willing now to spend money on premium luxury gyms, premium products, premium devices. And I think it is becoming, like I said, more and more integrated within society. That's becoming normal. And people who almost don't do any of that is almost less common than it used to be. And then I added this in this morning because yesterday when I was getting the tube home from a different talk I was doing, these 3 ads, so the Therabody and the 3 on the left-hand side, were in a row in the same tube station. And it's amazing in central London that this is what is being targeted towards people. So there are obviously other ads as well, but I'm amazed at how much is focused on health and optimization. I'd also argue that 3 of these products that are being advertised are the icing on top of the cake in terms of health. So there's a massage gun, red light, and some vitamins. And they're all very useful in certain situations, but a lot of people are purchasing these and spending money on these without having some pretty good basics and core principles in place around their health and lifestyle. And the one on the right I thought was interesting because we've gone through this phase of pushing like real food and nourishment for people, and now we're doing it for our pets. And so the ad is like, you know, real food for your dog, which I thought was interesting just to see that as well. So this was all yesterday. I just happened to see it and I thought it was relevant for today's talk. So that's me done. I hope that was in some way interesting for, I know, like a different kind of audience and stuff. And like I said, I'm happy to chat about some of the specifics around apparel and innovation as well.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Peter?
I've got 2. I think one is not very relevant in terms of apparel, but I'd just be interested in your opinion.
Yep.
And the second one is a bit more relevant to the presentation. But the first one is, I've noticed there's a huge increase in the exploration of wearable technology in sport at the moment, like for example with rugby, with the mouth guards and now with impact on the head. Do you think there's anywhere that's like really missing that needs to be targeted?
Good question. I haven't really thought about like specifics. I think the technology is usually applicable across multiple sports. So the example you've given, just for everyone's context, in rugby, there's now like an integrated technology into like mouth guards and gum shields that will measure the impact. And you can see this in some competitions where players will be taken off if an impact has reached a certain threshold. So the technology is quite advanced. So that's quite a niche example. But other ones like heart rate tracking or distance or pace, those common ones, they tend to spread across like multiple sports. So I think more and more sports, like the technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And so I think it's integrating across multiple sports now much faster than it used to be. So it used to be reserved for basically the team that had the most, or the athlete that had the most money. And that's obviously, in my opinion, that's almost the same effect as steroids. And the reason they're not allowed is because if you have enough money, you can pay your way to better data. I think that's now sort of not the case. But I'll have to have a proper think about like if there's a particular sport or activity that doesn't or isn't being served. Well, I don't know. It's a good question.
And then the second one, I think, leads a bit more from this. In your opinion, hypothetically, what do you think will become the next kind of fad or something that's been taken from a professional sport that is becoming more fashionable rather than one for use?
Another good question. I think maybe I'll I'll kind of come back to it, but I think some of these technologies will become even more integrated within, like, I think, clothing and what people do. So I think an extreme example of that, I've seen there's some fibers that have been woven into like certain apparels that can measure heart rate. Obviously they have to get connected up, but so instead of having a heart rate strap or a device, you technically could have a garment that's embedded with that technology. So that's an example of where like I can see some of this merging and going towards. That's not necessarily directly from sport, but I do think one of the things that sport has access to is if you're an athlete in a professional setup or an elite setup, you will have access to like a team of experts in every different discipline. So if you're a top football athlete, you'll have a team of physiotherapists, strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists. You'd also have, your sport coaches. You might have the best medical doctors, surgeons, and also then if you're sponsored by a big brand, Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, etc., you have access to their teams and their newest innovations. But I think now, instead of those companies seeding stuff directly with the athletes, I do think because of social media now, everything is just getting to market so much faster. And so I think the everyday person like myself and everyone in the room, like we will have access to the same technologies that professional athletes have at the same time. So it's not going to be necessarily, 2-3 years later or 10 years later that we're getting some stuff that elite athletes have had. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but.
Can I be really cheeky and ask a third question? Do you think that nowadays, because I know that back in the day, I was born in South Africa and I was actually a little bit more a rugby player because back in the days they couldn't just be athletes, they had to have another separate job. Do you think that with the rise of social media, especially since COVID, athletes have kind of become kind of quasi-influencers and maybe that's why it's impacting us so much?
Excuse me. Yes, definitely. And I had this conversation with a elite athlete yesterday where unless you're an athlete at like the very, very, very best of your sport, and even them, I think now, they almost all need to have an online or social presence. And I almost think, again, those top athletes almost need to have a way of connecting with people that isn't their sport or activity as well. And so if it's a rugby player, they need to have a hobby of, if it's golf or cooking or something that they can connect with a wider audience than just their sport. But I do think even those elite athletes now, there are some brands who will collaborate with a content creator or influencer or social media person, whatever you want to give them the terminology, and will pay them more money than an athlete at the highest level in the same activity because of the reach and the engagement and the, I guess, influence and awareness that they can bring to a product or products versus an elite athlete. So I think some of the elite athletes are seeing that and saying, okay, well, like, a lot of people are interested in seeing what that elite athlete does to be so good at what they do, but they also need to share that. And it's kind of links back to, I guess, the point I was saying earlier on about companies and athletes now not being afraid to share everything, because it used to be seen very much as like, I'm not going to tell anybody what I do because that's my secret to get to the top level. But now I think they're more willing to do it because they know they can get more support and more funding to support them, and it takes pressure off and then they can perform better as well. So yeah, I do think every athlete now is almost a part-time content creator influencer as well.
I think there was an incident at the Australian Open at the moment where there was an athlete, one of the players, male players, I think he got through to the quarterfinals maybe, and his partner is a big influencer. He lost in the quarterfinals, I think, and it transpires that she was paid more to be there as a kind of viewer than his prize money in getting to the quarterfinals or something, because she's like, the endorsements, etc., that she got. So it was quite an interesting example of like,
I believe that as well. I've seen some numbers that like I'm not surprised to hear, particularly for someone who's like still obviously, and I don't know who this is by the way, but who's at a really high level, maybe isn't the number 1 or 2 and getting to the final, but they're not making as much money just from the sport. So that's probably someone who will try obviously do some more content and other things to fit in with them. And you're seeing, I think a really clear example of that for me, particularly related to fashion and apparel, is NBA. So basketball athletes, both male and female now, the walk into a game, and I don't know if anybody watches basketball, like I love it as a sport, but every athlete will have, or most athletes will have, that's their opportunity to showcase their like fashion and their style. That's nothing to do with basketball. So you'll see some pretty extravagant outfits, some quite extreme ones. And you'll also see some top athletes who will have a sports apparel sponsor. So Nike, Adidas, again, those big ones, but they'll also have the opportunity to collaborate with, premium high-end ones. So you'll see Gucci, Versace, other ones who will actually sponsor a walk-in outfit for them. So they'll walk in whatever it might be and then just take it off and play a game of basketball at the highest level. But that's a really clear-cut example for me of an athlete ecosystem that has like a really clear, like they're unbelievably good athletes, but they also have a really high profile to tap into their insights their interests in different things outside of their sport as well.
I guess similar, what do you think is like the purpose of showing a heart rate of an athlete in the public? Like, is the audience going to relate to that on any other level besides performance?
Good question. So I have some in-depth thoughts that I can get into if we want, but I think because the technology is so common now, and that a lot of people who are watching golf, for example, in the one I showed, will also be wearing the same technology. And for somebody to be able to look at a top-level professional golfer in a situation and see what their heart rate is, there are limitations to that because we don't know if that's high for that person or if it's low. But a lot of people will look at it and say, oh, his heart rate when he's putting in a really intense situation is 140 beats per minute. And when I do it, it's 180 beats per minute because I'm a terrible golfer and I get nervous when I'm putting. So I think there's just a level of relatability that people are interested in. But it's a great question because is it relevant to anyone watching? It probably isn't, and it probably doesn't impact, I don't think the professional athlete is thinking of that at the time either. But I do think the level of transparency is what people want. And this was kind of, again, linked to even just all the social pieces. I think we're in an age where everyone wants like behind the scenes or like transparency over what happens and transparency over everything. I think like what other people are eating and what they're doing. And I think that's just another layer of it. But I do think it's because of the connection that people watching and supporting that person have. They're using the same technology and they're able to sort of connect and understand. And if they, like another example would be if you see an athlete's heart rate is really high and they're able to drop their heart rate quite low before a pressure situation. That's happened we've seen that in NFL and golf, in football as well. That's sometimes a skill that us mortal people don't have, that I would feel very stressed under that situation, but the best athletes in the world can calm themselves down before a situation. So that's, I guess, interesting to some people to be able to relate to it.
Do you think that the optimization thing will also go beyond physical aspects and into emotional regulation?
Definitely. I think it's harder to quantify or put a number and measure on, but definitely. I mean, even from a sleep tracking point of view, all of these devices will estimate like how long you sleep for and the quality of your sleep, but they're at a point now where they're as accurate as they can probably get because they're not actually measuring brainwave activity. And so, but there's now companies who are developing like sleep masks and headbands that you can measure brainwave activity and wear during your sleep. And so I do think, the reason I bring that up is because if you can measure brainwave activity, you can potentially measure other psychological stressors and things like that. So I do think that's maybe one of the next components. So after we've sort of collected as many metrics as we can from a physical sense, we can't forget about the psychological components of everything. And that goes from, again, elite athletes, but for everybody, of course, in general health and well-being. So they're being measured now in terms of like qualitative research and that type of things, which is still important. And it's the same like if you end up working in fashion, qualitative is massively important. You have to be like, we did some research on that and we got people to rank and rate things based on preferences visually and how utilitarian something looked and how premium something looked. And it's very hard for us to discern exactly what that means, but it is still important. So yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be a big thing in the next few years.
Yeah, I don't know if they are, but I know that you can probably bet on the distance ran, at least in football. I wonder why we can't see like, oh, like this player who's really prone to injury, his heart rate is up, or maybe we can sense like, oh, he's really like holding his leg, like maybe. I wonder why that hasn't been capitalized on.
It's a great idea. One of the reasons is, so golf was an example where the technology company had an agreement with the tour and the players to allow their data to be shown. But there's another big piece in sport where there's questions being asked around who owns the data. So for example, when I worked in team sports, we would fit out football, rugby players with heart rate monitors, with GPS devices to measure distance and speed and heart rate, everything. And there was often questions of like, who owns the data? Now it's the players. And so at the end of the day, if they don't want their own physiological data being shared, well then I can't share it. And so I think unless there's some league or sport-wide agreements around it, that could be honestly a really interesting future for some sports, depending on, and particularly like, I mean, gambling is on every sport, and I've seen, I don't gamble, but I've seen some other things that you can bet on. You can bet on a football match and who takes the first throw in. And you can bet on, what color someone wears. And like, it is really intricate in terms of what you can bet on. So I could see if, I'm trying to think of a sport like maybe poker, for example, where imagine a device or a company was able to share live heart rate data or stress numbers or something that would indicate, okay, if this player's under stress, then you're gambling. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic. I'll definitely keep an eye out for that one.
I did hear that the NBA is in the process of, I guess, like universalizing that, like players' data being kind of live fed. So principally for kind of betting. Because I think that historically they've been quite pioneering in sort of betting and kind of like building the infrastructure for that.
Yeah, the NBA is quite a forward-thinking sport in my opinion. I just like basketball as well, but you actually will see them. They partner with some small startups in innovation, different companies, and so they try to spot obviously some of these things and even some of these ideas early, so that they can integrate it into their association. So it's a good sport to have a look at probably from a few angles, the innovation side and the startups and the products, but also, like I said, from seeing what some of the male and female athletes are actually wearing, how they're integrating into both like a sport audience and a non-sporting audience. It's very different. American sport, and particularly NBA, is very different to like European sport, I would say. And I've been to like a range of different things, but I remember I went to my first ice hockey game when I lived in Vancouver. And compared to being at a football game in the UK, like if you went to a West Ham game, the event is the football, but when you go to a sporting event in America, the event is the event. There is a game going on, but in the ice hockey game that I went to, I was so amazed. There was a timeout, and the players had to wait for a song to finish playing before the ref blew a whistle to let them play again. Which is just, in my mind, as someone from Ireland and the UK watching football and rugby, that was just so alien to me that like the focal point is actually the people watching the event. And so yeah, I just think that's like an interesting sport to kind of keep an eye out for.
I have a question about that thing about American sport, particularly very interesting, because if you think about the kind of commentary you get on like baseball games, baseball terrible sport, American football even worse, but also because
All of the American sports, yeah.
cricket, rugby sport,
Just sports.
golf worst sport. My point here, the question here is like, we now live in a world of like multiple screens. So when you're watching the baseball or watching this thing happen, in the commentary you get in baseball, it's often this is the first home run that someone has hit at this stadium playing away for the last 17 years. Right? There's like a proliferation of statistics.
Yeah.
And the cynical view of why that's happening is because nothing happens. Like you throw the ball and then like there's sort of a pause for 4 minutes, and you've got to think of something to put in it.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing you put in it is statistics. And I wonder if there's a kind of way in which the spectacle of watching sport and just like having a heart rate is just a thing that is constantly changing. So you can be like, oh, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down.
Yeah.
It's going up. And so there's like a kind of the datafication is actually just like part of having you not just look at TikTok while they're waiting for the next.
It probably is, yeah. And I think even if you watch NFL, like a lot of my friends would be quite into it, and they would watch like Red Zone, which kind of pulls in like a highlight from one game whilst there's breaks in others, and it is very much this like big spectacle on a Sunday evening or Sunday afternoon for people in America. So I do think it is another point, and I've seen some statistics that are just pointless that are being shared on, not like in any sport, that like this is the first person to do this wearing a pair of socks that are this type, so that is like an extreme, that is a little bit of a cynical view, but it is true to a point that there is a statistic for everything. So it probably is, but like I said, it's probably linked to the conversation we had around like the relatability of some of those pieces. Is like, I can't play those sports at that high level, but if there are other ways for me to connect with this person or this team, well then that's going to create more loyalty and things. So if that is on, like I said, a fashion piece, if it is on wearable tech or health, or if it's on a hobby that this person or the team has, I'm just going to support that team, and I'm going to watch it because of other reasons as well as the actual sport, but obviously I'm going to be loyal to that organization because of all the other things around it as well.
I have a question, sorry, not the second question about the best sport, football. And I get when I was 5, in the 1998 World Cup final, Brazil, who had had an amazing World Cup, went out drinking the night before the final, got completely trashed. They were like, we are going to destroy France. Lost to France 3-0. And I wonder, about this kind of health thing in general, is the culture of sport changing away from hedonism, pleasure, exuberance, enjoyment, towards like something much more constrained, optimized? Kind of, how do you see the kind of culture of sport changing in general in relation to this kind of gamification? I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo is a Whoop brand ambassador.
Yeah.
He's also the most followed person on Instagram in the world. So like, he's really like kind of at the forefront of this, but like, he doesn't seem to go out taking heroin 3 days.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think like it's a really good point, or like a really interesting point of view, because I do think you'd even see some criticism now of like, so the American model of sports, and sorry, we're talking about sport, and I hope this is like interesting still, but the American model of sport is very much like it's a business. Yeah. So each team is owned by like a business person or a group of business people, or a conglomerate of very wealthy people, and they're in it because they probably enjoy the sport as a bit of a hobby, and they have millions and billions to actually spend on their hobby, but they also want to make money from it. And now I think there's like, you're seeing that in the UK and other sports and rugby and football, where the model is, of course, like winning is always important. I think for me, it is always, you still want performance to be at the fore of it, but there's also so much opportunity for athletes and teams to be successful without winning. I think that's a new thing. And I think that's probably where this like optimization of everything comes in, and data, because if like, it is, okay, if there's a football team in the UK, who do you support? England, okay. So if England are making money, now they're an NGB, so this isn't, maybe that's not the best example. So if Man City, for example, so if Manchester City are making money, like millions every year, they're selling out stadiums, both men's and women's teams, they're competing in all the highest leagues, they're attracting big players and brands, they're sponsored by the Etihad is the name of the stadium, and they've got relationships with every popular brand, cars, but they don't win the Premier League and they don't win the Champions League. Is that a success for those years? Like, I think it's a really interesting, I don't think it's a clear-cut answer. I think for the purist who's a football fan will say no, because like, we need to win. But if you ask business people, they'll go, yeah, like we've made a profit year on year for the last 15 years. Of course it's a win. And we have supporters globally around the world. Our Instagram following is this. We have all these. So like it is interesting. I hope that the like core nature of like competing is still in sport in a few years' time. But it is going to be interesting to see where all the statistics and the numbers and the like, I guess, data and money or the economics of it as well come into play.
I guess, can I ask about, because you were talking about this kind of, I guess, like a trickle down effect of sort of producing products, and that then trickling down to kind of like a everyday consumer. And I guess like I was curious in terms of like I guess from a kind of sports scientist perspective, like what your understanding of the consequences of everyday people having kind of habits and routines, adopting them from sort of elite athletes. I mean, like, I always understand, like, elite athletes as being a very, like, they're a kind of freakish group of people who, take part in or do certain things, habits and routines, etc., that are not designed for the everyday person and everyday kind of life.
Yeah.
I remember, like, once hearing about, after Bradley Wiggins winning the kind of Olympics and the Tour de France in 2012, and people sort of adopting his kind of routines, and him just going like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, this is a horrible way to live. Like, he was like starving himself like for a year.
Well, also with a job for other people who like he's not working, but that's his job. Yeah.
So I guess I was curious in terms of like this, I guess kind of like fascination with sort of performance in relation to a kind of activity where, kind of elite sporting activity where kind of performance has a very specific kind of context to it, where then it's trickling down into kind of everyday life.
Yeah.
Like what the consequences of that
Yeah.
are.
I think for the most part it's net positive in that if people are learning from these elite group of athletes who are able to do amazing things, if we're taking things from that, I think that's a good thing. So particularly principles around like, okay, how to get fitter or sleep better or eat healthy and recover and all those pieces. So I think overall the effect is positive. Now, I don't think people should be replicating what some of those elites are doing because, like I said, that's their full-time job. They have their own stressors, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the stressors that you and I have of a full-time job or working weekends, and that's their work is their activity. So I think people should just appreciate that for them to get to those levels, if that's their goal, is a complete, the gap is enormous from a skill point of view, but also a physical point of view. I think one of the dangers of some of the adoption of, like, I guess, technology and even strategies and training and all the other pieces is it's kind of linked to the point I mentioned to you was around, elite athletes and performance. They have teams of people, of experts who train to understand all these different metrics and to advise on interpreting certain numbers. And for a long time in sport, like I've worked with like GPS technology and heart rate and force plates and all of this technology that was once reserved for elite athletes and teams, but is now accessible to everybody. But what's come with that has not the education or the interpretation or the advice from experts or people just working in the field hasn't followed with it. So at least for an elite athlete, if they see some metric or metrics that look off, they can look at it themselves, but they can also ask 10 people the next morning to go, hey, I saw this, is this funny? Okay, a sports scientist can go analyze something and check something else. Their doctor can go interpret their bloods. The nutritionist can go advise on whatever it might be. But for everybody else, they see it on their phone and they completely misinterpret what the information needs. And then that can cause stress in itself, and they can go down a rabbit hole of trying to solve a problem that they don't actually have. And the really common one for that is sleep. So people will create this notion that they have a sleep problem, but in my experience, like, not everybody does, and even elite athletes don't. So one of the things when I worked in football, we basically tried to assess if any of the athletes we worked with had a sleep problem. And in a squad of, say, 24, there were maybe 5 or 6 athletes who not had a problem, but who wanted some support or maybe had some struggles going to sleep. But everybody else didn't. So we just didn't speak to the rest of them about sleep. We just, obviously, you encourage good behaviors, but then with the people who wanted help or had a little bit of a problem, we addressed it. But now, because if people see a poor recovery score or like 1 hour less sleep than what's like optimal, they start to panic and there's a bit of a snowball effect. So I think that's probably the main danger. I do think, like I said, overall, it's positive because of it's promoting good behaviors, activity, sleep, everything else. But that's the dangerous side, I guess, is the misinterpretation of it.
I just wanted to ask a question about like this kind of tangential to this idea of this of these tracking things being a little bit of a status symbol. I don't know if you saw there was this phenomenon. I think it was in Silicon Valley, but I don't know if that was just me being judgy about them. But there was this thing called Strava muling, where people were like giving mules their Strava to go like do runs for them, so it looked like they were like really active.
I did see that.
I wonder if you had any opinions or thoughts about what that means.
Yeah, it's wild that it's even a topic of conversation. Yeah, the Strava mule thing is interesting, but I think it's like, I don't know if it's taken, like, so again, athletes will do anything to like win, I guess. That's their main thing. And you've seen, I think in some races, like there were some ultra races where people cheated, where they got a taxi from one point to another to obviously try to win. Now, in that case, they're motivated by, you know, maybe prize money and other things as well. But I think there's something psychological there that's the same for an elite athlete trying to cheat the rules, not necessarily always illegally. You know, in team sports, people will try cheat within the boundaries of rules to obviously get an advantage. That's what they're going to do. So I think on the extreme sense, yeah, like the Strava muling is just a much further worse version of what that is. But it does show that like the power of those sort of like health or performance things, even with like how popular fitness and running and everything is now, like there's certain expectations of, if anyone is like will see stuff online, like a big benchmark in running is like a 3-hour marathon. A lot of people have this like thing that they have to run faster than 3 hours, but the average marathon time, I think in London last year for a male was like 3 hours and 55 minutes and female was 4 hours 20 or so, you know, it was something so much more, but for some reason we've normalized anything over 3 hours being slow. And so I think it's always connected to this like social kind of awareness, and it's just how like the people who are going to share most of this stuff online are most likely going to be better at it. And that's probably again linked to it. But I do think the status piece is interesting because you will see, like even there's some business people that I've worked with who are conscious of, I guess, their like physical presence in a room as well. And so it's linked to this idea of like, okay, if I'm in a room of other business leaders, like I want to have a physical and an intellectual presence that, I don't want to say dominate is like a harsh word, but sort of that people can recognize. And so if I'm a business leader and I walk into a room, I want people to say like, oh, this guy or girl is like unbelievably smart because they're a leader of this company, but right, they're in great shape and they look after themselves. And I think some of these tech pieces kind of are part of it. It's like, oh, if you see like an Oura ring, it's like, oh, okay, like he or she is obviously looking after their sleep, and then like maybe there's a play as well for like, okay, if the leader of a company or CEO is looking after their sleep, maybe they're running their company like that and their employees are also healthy. And then it creates this sort of like everything's compared between each other, but it is a really interesting like psychological component. I hope no one here does that Strava viewing thing. It's mental, yeah.
The enhanced games is a proposed multi-sport event, the Olympics basically, but doesn't follow, what is it called, the World Anti-Doping something organization. Doesn't follow their rules. So people can take any performance enhancing drug at all.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. But do you think that there will be a change in the culture of sport around this kind of thing, or do you think like we're going to stay with this kind of naturalistic, kind of almost like fetish?
I think.
Can't take,
Yeah, like the example of a competition or a sport that has both kind of, I guess, non-steroid users or non-drug users and is powerlifting.
Yeah.
So powerlifting, there are two competitions where you're sort of clean or whatever the terminology is used and not. And so it's a very clear distinction. I think I'm not for it. I don't think people should be doing that because again, it comes back to the point of people will just, if people have more money, they can pay for all these things and then they'll just win, and it kind of reserves the talent to people that just have money versus the people who, come from lesser backgrounds but can just work hard and get to a point. I'm interested to see what the results come out like, because I think you'll be surprised. I don't think there's going to be that much of a difference between the results in the enhanced games versus some of the Olympic games. Now that could be down to the fact that some of the people in the Olympic games are also doping and they just haven't been caught. So that's something to like understand and be aware of as well. But I do still think that like the clean sport will prevail because I think it's just tied to like morals and good principles. I think that people still do have, maybe despite some of the other weird things that people do. I do think that will prevail, but it may be like you've seen some athletes go to the enhanced games and I guess receive quite a lot of backlash from peers and stuff. But some of them were saying, well, okay, I'm a mid-tier athlete, and again, it's maybe connected to some of the like I need to make some more money out of the sport that I'm good at, but I'm not the best at. Okay, so if I go to the enhanced games, they're going to pay me better. I can document this journey that no one else, like people are interested in watching. I hope not everybody is inspired to follow them in that way, but like everyone will be interested to see, okay, if this person takes drugs in the enhanced games, what does it actually mean? And so there's opportunity then to get paid more money, to compete, to also then maybe get some more brand deals and compete. But I'm curious around how brands approach it, because for them to be affiliated and associated with athletes who are tainted, I guess, how does that reflect on a brand? So yeah, it's a very interesting like area to watch.
The line at the moment seems quite arbitrary to me. I don't know if that's like it seems quite like arbitrary what counts as doping and what doesn't count as doping. Like there are certain kinds of treatments that are experimental you can do that probably would be doping, invented earlier, and you sort of caught in that. Like there's I feel like what you're describing is tainted. I agree with you now, but like in 5 years' time, is that still going to have that same stigma attached to it?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, the answer. And I guess like I do think the like WADA and associations are good at like establishing sort of like different levels. Okay, so for example, you can get like a therapeutic use exemption for certain drugs. So an asthmatic, for example, might use an inhaler but you have to go through a process to say like, I have been diagnosed with this. This is helping just for this specific reason. Because in other instances, you could see athletes use it to try get a performance advantage. So I do think there's some good processes around that as well. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm interested to like watch some of those things without hopefully people being inspired to kind of follow that same path as well.
I guess my final question again, which I'm asking all the speakers, I guess, is going back to the theme of the summit and this kind of optimization. For you, and I guess like within the work that you do, like what does, I guess like, what are we being optimized for? This is often a kind of question that gets missed out, and it's assumed we all know what that is.
Yeah, I think it's impossible for somebody else, or it should be impossible for somebody else to tell you what you're optimizing for. It should be your own decision. So for some elite athletes, they're optimizing for their particular sport. But if you're optimizing maybe for your own life, or your job, or whatever hobbies and stuff you have, or just life in general, that's what you should be optimizing for. So it kind of does go back to the earlier conversation around your optimization, and the strategies and the technology you use might be a little bit different to what other people do. But to me, it's almost just trying to like remove or reduce some of the noise around everything. So with wearable technology, it's like, okay, there's 400 metrics you can look at, but there's probably 5 or 6 that I would recommend. And it's like, okay, just optimize those pieces and ignore the rest. It's probably the same with everything, with food. It's like, okay, don't worry too much about all these things, just 80-90% of this. I think it's also the same, like I get overwhelmed sometimes when I go into even like clothes store and grocery store. There's just so much choice for everything now. I think part of the optimization should be just like, again, removing some of the options, because we just don't, like, I don't need 7 different types of like whatever food I'm buying and different salt. I don't know. It's just like, it seems a bit crazy that there's so many different varieties. And it's good obviously for like economics and stuff as well. But I do think, yeah, like optimization for each person should be their own version. And yeah, like I said, that will look very different for you and I and everybody else in the room and everybody online. But it's difficult to filter some of that because of how much stuff is being shared on social media now.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me.